Today on Sekulow, now hiring IRS agents, yet again, willing to use deadly force.
Keeping you informed and engaged, now more than ever. This is Sekulow. We want to hear from you. Share and post your comments or call 1-800-684-3110. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
Hey, welcome to Sekulow. We are taking your calls to 1-800-684-3110. The IRS back at it again. I love catching the IRS. We've done it before at the ACLJ. As I hold up our case, this was the consent order, pretty thick if you see it in my hand, from the IRS. This was the Tea Party case, the Lynchpins of Liberty case the ACLJ did on behalf of all those Tea Party organizations when they were being targeted by the tax-exempt division. Remember, they were asking for the content of prayers, their back-end access to their email list. Hey, what did you say? Give me we need transcripts of every speech that's ever been made at your local grassroots organization. Ultimately, of course, we won all those cases. There was both the consent order, and then there was also of the financial penalties case that moved forward, where the IRS also paid out millions of dollars to these groups. Then again in 2021, so years later, a group comes forward, and again, this group, interesting enough, was, again, I think it was, what was the exact name of the group, Will? Christians Engaged, yeah. Okay? And then they get denied. Remember, this was in 2021? Now, ultimately, that's been resolved. That was resolved because there was public outcry and of our case, because this consent order binds the IRS not to do exactly what they did to Christians Engaged. And what they did, remember that one where they came up with their own legend, and they said they're too Republican, but they put D Party to stand for Republican.
Yeah,
I mean, it was
on the documents it said Party D or something like that, and it was D, like as you would see like a Democratic congressperson, with like the D at the beginning of their name.
Yeah,
it was that, but D stood for Republican.
So it'd be harder in a FOIA type situation or a case when you're getting discovery if you put down R,
you're searching for
it wouldn't come up the right way. If you come Republican, would come up backwards. That case has been settled, but we filed a FOIA because we said, you know what? Usually, when they're doing this to one group, a lot of other groups got denied or ignored. Sometimes you just got nothing back from the IRS, and they just say, okay, I don't want to mess with the IRS. We'll just move on, because these are a lot of times small grassroots organizations just getting started. They have just gotten to the point where they're fundraising enough where they need to even file. And you file really so you can get insurance and things like that, or else you can, you don't have to actually go through the process. These are groups that voluntarily subject themselves to this scrutiny to get the official tax-exempt status from the IRS. You don't actually have to go through that process if you don't want to, but most of the time, if you need to get insurance and things like that, you've got to go through it. Or big donors, they want to know that you've got the status.
Yeah, they're looking for the tax break.
So we now have our FOIA, right? Our FOIA goes out 2 years ago. Finally, the court comes back. They want a status report. It's called a joint status report. That's up on the screen now. I have it in my hands, too. Why is the IRS taking so long for our be on the lookout list? Because we want to know, is this happening again to other groups? Well, Logan, they said the plaintiff's search terms, that's us, have resulted in defendants collecting over 43,000 records.
Yeah, not pages. Records. 43,000 individual records with words like Christian, Republican, conservative, Tea Party, prayer, word of God. Going through those phrases are some of the terms that were used again. And this was all on that. We said, what's happening right now? Oh, it's just too much. We can't handle it. That means there's that many documents floating around having this conversation.
So we're battling the IRS, but I want to put it on the screen now. You know what the IRS wants to do with your taxpayer dollars? Hire 300 more of these special agents at the IRS. Can we scroll down to show them what they look like? Yeah. You got to be ready to use deadly force against American taxpayers. That's where your taxpayers dollars are going. If again, the House is battling to keep this money from going to the IRS, we've got to stay on that. We'll take your calls. A weaponized IRS. It's a weaponization of every branch of the federal government. 1-800-684-3110 to talk to us on air.
Yeah, a week ago they said they were going to arm just with a calculator.
Yep.
But as we've seen, not that. Give us a call, as you said, 1-800-684-3110. Check out the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org.
IRS is planning to hire special agents who carry guns and make arrests in all 50 states. The IRS says that these agents must, quote, carry a firearm, be prepared to protect him or herself or others from physical attacks at any time and without warning, and they must be willing to use force, up to and including the use of deadly force.
The additional money from the IRA, how many armed revenue agents will be hired to accomplish these audits?
None, sir.
With the additional money provided by the IRA, does the IRS plan to hire 87,000 revenue agents to carry guns to audit families and small businesses?
We do not.
It's my understanding from a communication I received from your agency last fall that criminal investigation plans to hire 360 special agents per year over the next 5 years for an approximate net gain of 1,200 special agents considering attrition. Is that accurate?
That sounds about right. Our criminal investigation division, which deals with fraud and significant cases of tax evasion.
Correct. And those special agents are armed.
Okay.
Those special agents are armed. Is that correct?
They are armed. It's less than 3% of the IRS workforce.
And they avoid magnetometers at airports and things like that. So
they're law enforcement personnel.
Now, you said earlier that you're not hiring any new special agents that will be armed, but it sounds to me like you are.
Well, my understanding, I'm glad you're clarifying. My understanding of the question was around audits.
I understand. But I think it's important to note that there is a difference. There will be new hires that will be armed.
I say defund the IRS in this case. I mean, this is a dangerous move.
IRS agents are able to maybe come to Matt Taibbi's house. Remember that surprise call with a gun?
So welcome back to Sekulow. You know, I saw too. Janice wrote in on Rumble. She said, "Does the ACLJ do Second Amendment defense?" And we do. I want to remind people that we've stood strong on the Second Amendment. Every major case about our Second Amendment rights, the ACLJ has filed on the right side. And in fact, we're working on one right now in New York on places of worship and making sure they have the ability, especially synagogues,
just to have security. To
have security that they can then deem, like if they need to deem someone in their synagogue to be armed, because the synagogues are open, they're almost open all the time. I mean, they've got, again, depending on what kind of Judaism you're talking about, you basically have an open door policy because of major holidays and also just the prayer schedule, things like that. Kind of like a lot of Catholic churches that are open.
Episcopal
you
churches,
right
24 hours a day.
Yeah,
the doors are never locked.
Yeah, and so they were having an issue, of course, with the state of New York and being able to get their own security. So I just want to remind our listeners, our supporters out there, we are engaged in those cases, and we're working on one right now at the ACLJ in one of the toughest states when it comes to Second Amendment rights and gun rights, and that is, of course, in New York. So we've been, throughout our history, on the right side standing with the Second Amendment, just like our First Amendment rights. I mean, these are the key rights in our country. And so when they say, like, free speech, it's too bad we have a First Amendment, or we got to get rid of that Second Amendment. That's when, we step in and say, absolutely not. We have these to protect ourselves from government overreach, both the ability to speak, the ability to petition our government, the ability to have arms in our homes and be able to defend ourselves. This is what kind of defines America. 1-800-684-3110, because, Logan, you might want to make sure you have a strong Second Amendment when the IRS can come knocking on your door, and they're not just knocking on your door like they did to Matt Taibbi and they've done to reporters while he was testifying on Capitol Hill.
Right.
They showed up at his house and said, "Oh, we'll come back next time." And now you realize when they show up at your house, we're supposed to believe from the IRS Commissioner, Danny Werfel, that they're really not a bunch of armed agents. They're just a bunch of nerds with calculators, right?
He said that, right?
Yeah, take a listen. Let's play it.
Let me note something about our civil side compliance employees. Despite what some might think or say, these public servants within the IRS are armed only with calculators and their skills to help us address complex issues. Their work will give people confidence that all taxpayers, regardless of means, are being treated fairly under the tax laws.
Okay. The key word he used there was their civil side. But the IRS has an expanding now criminal side. Now, they've always had one because they go in sometimes with the FBI. Like if there's a raid on a business, they go in, the accountants go in. And sometimes those accountants need to be able to defend themselves if it's a surprise raid. But they usually are playing they're playing a secondary role.
Yeah, the way he said that was, this isn't happening. This is a conservative talking point.
Oh, yeah, they all laughed.
Yeah, exactly. This is like, I feel like Maury Povich being like, and that was determined to be a lie. That's what it feels like.
We know now that they are trying to hire an additional 300 armed special agents for their criminal division, bringing it up to 1,200. I mean, it's like, why do we need so many government agencies that are willing to use deadly force against Americans?
Is the IRS knocking on this many doors?
Are they raiding that many dangerous businesses?
That's what I'm saying. Like, imagine the amount you're talking about here when you're hiring this many people. That is the amount of people that they are sending out into the field. Not people that are getting phone calls, not people that are getting intimidated by letters or emails or anything else like that, which we've all gotten those. This is the amount of staff they have to have people in the field enforcing it, and that just doesn't seem to add up.
So they want to. It's actually adding 1,200 over 5 years to their existing number. I mean, so they're doubling in size about? Is that what they're doing? It looks like they're doubling their weaponized side. And they try to play it down, but members of Congress are calling them out. And by the way, they tried to take down that job posting once, remember, because it said the use of deadly force. It's back up.
Right.
I mean, it's back up. I'm reading it in my hands.
That's even more.
Key requirements, major duties. Be willing and able to participate in arrest, execution of search warrant, other dangerous assignments. They are supposed to be playing a secondary role in those. They're not supposed to be the ones busting down the door.
If something happens, sure, they can have protection and be safe. We obviously want that, but not. This feels like they are the enforcers,
right? That they're not playing. It should be the FBI going in, clearing it out. Then the agents come in to do their account work to get the documents they need, either from computers or files. But that's not how this reads. You got to carry a firearm. You have to be ready to protect yourself and others from physical attacks at any time without warning. And you have to be willing to use deadly force. The use of deadly force. You have to be willing to kill other Americans. Now, listen, the left always talks about how we have too many police.
That's what I was about to say. They're the ones who talk about the fact that there's, we need to have these like human resource officers kind of out in the field to make sure everything is okay, not police officers only. And if you agree with that, then you can't agree with this. You can't say, I don't think we should have police forces. Instead, we need to have people in Health and Human Services stepping in and working with people in mental health cases. It doesn't always need to be cops with guns. Well, then it can't be the other way around when it's just talking about going up to somebody's house because of, at the end of the day, sure, there are some bad actors they have to deal with. But I have a feeling that's not the mass majority of the people that are being raided by the IRS.
Well, I mean, this happened yesterday. Remember, Congress did the exact same thing you just said on the debt limits and federal spending hearing yesterday. It's a Congressman Reschenthaler from Pennsylvania. I hope I said that right, Congressman. Yeah, Reschenthaler. Take a listen.
The question isn't the exact number of firearms that's being issued to the IRS. The question is, why does the IRS need firearms to begin with? And I find it absolutely rich that the party that wants to send social workers to answer domestic police calls, that party, they want IRS agents to have fully automatic weapons. Let me just put this in perspective. When I was in the JAG Corps, I was in Baghdad, sent in the red zone. You know what I was issued? A 9mm Beretta. And that's what I got to go in the red zone. And your party wants agents, IRS agents, to have fully automatic weapons.
So that's even next level. So he was using his own. So he was saying in the military, as part of the JAG, Judge Advocate General Post, as a military attorney or judge, when he had to go into the danger zone in Iraq, because he was not part of like an infantry group, but part of, again, the legal side of the military, he only got a handgun to defend himself. And that was in a war zone, in the worst part of the war zone. They want, I mean, that's
You're a military official.
I wasn't even thinking about it. They want fully automatic weapons, the IRS?
Is that what it says?
Yes. Fully automatic. They're going in with machine guns?
Yeah.
Yet they try to take away an AR-15 from America. They're going in with machine guns into your bill. Why? The IRS should never be in the lead with machine guns. And this is my whole problem is we need a military and we need police. But what we don't need is to weaponize every single agency in the federal government. If the IRS needs to raid a place that's dangerous, we have the FBI to help them.
And they come in and say,
we have U.S. Marshals. I mean, Lord Almighty, I could go through a whole list of all these different law enforcement agencies that already exist. It just seems like the left.
Yeah, what's the National Guard doing?
They love giving automatic weapons to the feds, but they don't want your local police force to have SWAT teams. I mean, seriously.
Yeah.
They don't want your local police to have access to those same kind of weapons
Or for them
in the
to-
trunk of their police cruisers if they have to stop a shooting or violent event.
Yeah, but
They don't want that.
But if you messed up filing the taxes, sorry, we're coming for you.
I mean, if it's that dangerous of a place to go in to get the files from, they should not be taking the lead on that part.
Right.
That part should be led by major law enforcement agencies who we have entrusted with those resources.
Look, we're not also just being hyperbolic here. Sure, do some of these agents maybe need some kind of security safety
That's what the
training?
Congressman was talking
Sure,
about.
of course. But what is this? Why is it so extreme?
Why do they need 1,200 more?
Right.
And it just, to me, when they're, whose door do they knock on? Journalists they don't like. Who do they come to? Middle-class Americans to audit more of your money. I mean, they're trying to downplay the fact that they've hired so many different, they want to hire 80,000 more, auditors and people like that. That's to go after middle-class Americans. Because let me tell you something. The poorest of the poor don't pay taxes. And the richest of the rich have lots of people handling their taxes. So who is in the middle trying to comply on their own? Middle-class Americans. Actually, even there, it's kind of working-class Americans who are trying to comply and figure things out with this giant internal revenue code. But why? I mean, I think it's got to be shocking to people if they want automatic weapons. They want machine guns to show up. This is the IRS.
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe, like you said, maybe people, because they're really talking about having a handgun on for safety in case there's protection. A lot of people in our audience, I'm sure, feel that way in their normal everyday life. But this is not what we're talking about here. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I mean, the IRS obviously has always been controversial. It's been a controversial department for the last few decades. And as we've seen them go after conservatives, weaponize their own departments.
Like the FBI, they have become politically motivated.
Right.
And this idea of protecting the Washington swamp and protecting the political ideology that they support from their higher-ups. That's dangerous.
Yeah, absolutely. So give us a call, 1-800-684-3110, 1-800-684-3110. We're going to keep this conversation rolling, also talk a little bit more in the next segment coming up about some of the new border plans as well. So we'll be discussing that coming up here in the next segment, so if you want to stay tuned. But if you want to call in specifically about this or some of our other topics, it's Friday. 1-800-684-3110. Support the work of the ACLJ by going to aclj.org. We are headed towards the very end of our matching challenge. You're talking about 2 days left, and then we take a little break from the match.
We're in court right now with the IRS because they just said, we can't comply with your FOIA. Why we targeted Christians engaged? Because there's 43,000 records that are relevant to what we asked. You have be on the lookout list again, targeting Christians and Republicans. I guess they do, because they got 43,000 records they don't want to give us. We're going to get them. We'll be right back.
The Freedom of Information Act allows people to petition their government and ask for the background information as to why they came to a certain decision.
It's thousands of pages of paper, and in those thousands of pages of paper, you usually find a nugget.
We are entitled as citizens of the United States to know about how our government works.
Government agencies acting out of control.
They want to keep Americans in the dark. That's why it's incredibly important to have the ACLJ constantly pushing to find out what the background information is.
Do you remember the Iran deal? There was a video about what took place on that deal, and it was edited. And the edit took out the key part of what was going on. State Department, White House, editing videos to keep it from the American public.
We have exposed that in our FOIA litigation, and we do that every day that we bring these cases.
We took it to the IRS. No one ever does that. And because of it, it's a very weak government agency that used to be the scary government agency.
What the IRS was doing was violating the Constitution and statutory law. Because of the litigation we engaged in, it's a different agency. They can't do what they were doing before.
We've got the declassified list of Obama administration officials who started asking to unmask. And they've been hiding behind in the shadows. These FOIAs bring them to light.
All of this information came because we went to court to get the information.
The power of Washington, D.C. only works when the rest of us, the rest of Americans, are kept in the dark.
We may find one item of information in thousands of documents of irrelevancies, but we persist and we're on it every day of our lives.
The work that the ACLJ does matters. It matters to policymakers. It matters to ordinary citizens all across America.
Those of you that support the ACLJ, this is what it's all about at the end of the day.
Think we haven't been on this, folks? We've been on it. All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your calls to 1-800-684-3110. That's 1-800-684-3110. I want to go to the phones because, as you know, I just want to reiterate, when the new IRS commissioner came in, who was an old IRS commissioner, who actually came in under the Obama administration after we took them apart, the IRS, bludgeoned was the term used by the Washington Post. I like that term. And they brought him in to kind of try to clean house, Danny Werfel. So it's a name we know from the IRS. So he was a commissioner then. He's back as a commissioner now. And he made the joke, we're really not about weapons. We're about calculators and our civil division. Well, yeah, but what he forgot to mention there is they have an entire criminal division that they are increasing in size. Under that new budget request for their $87 billion, they want to increase with an additional 1,200 armed special agents. And they've put back up that job posting that they took down once because they said it was inaccurate. They put it back up, the job posting that says, and they first of all, they have you dressed up like you've got a flak jacket on.
Yeah, like that. We didn't add that image.
That's
the image on the
that's
IRS
new. That's something
job
new
listing
that they've added to the job listings. Basically, you're going to be wearing bulletproof vest and automatic weapons, and under your major duties is the use of deadly force. Why is anyone at the IRS's major duty the use of deadly force? They are supposed to, in a situation where they're going in to a surprise. I mean, that's where they're talking about. When they're going into like a corporation or individual and they're surprising them and seizing their documents, they should not be the lead with the machine guns.
Yeah. No, and I don't think anyone would think that would be the case.
The FBI.
I don't think people would think that's what was happening.
Right. They're supposed to come in after this.
We want them to be the guys who they were only armed with calculators. Good.
Right. They're supposed to come into that situation. At least that's how I thought it was. They come into that situation after the facilities have been secured. And then they seize the documents that they need, or they go into the computers that they need.
Right.
They don't play both roles. The FBI or U.S. Marshal, someone else is supposed to assist them in the initial raid. And so why do they want 1,200 more? It's like, are there not enough FBI agents available? Because it seems like they're always missing the ball. Every time we hear about some major tragedy in the U.S., it was like, oh, yeah, we knew about it. We just didn't take any action. They've got to, so more federal law enforcement they're all about. What's interesting, Harry, is they want to defund our local police, but fund the feds.
Absolutely. And that is consistent, utterly consistent with the totalitarian agenda of cultural elites. They want local police officers to stand down and force citizens to surrender all of their rights to the federal government. So it's important to keep in mind that in February of 2023, this year, news reports surfaced suggesting that the IRS was prepared to go after waitresses and waiters in terms of their tip income. So imagine individuals from the Criminal Investigation Unit armed with flak jackets and automatic weapons going after a waiter or waitress who has failed to fully disclose his or her income. This makes no sense except if we are prepared to move toward some form of totalitarianism.
Yeah. I want to go to the phones, Logan, 1-800-684-3110. Let's do it.
Let's go. Bill's calling in Wyoming. You're on the air.
Hey, Bill.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. Appreciate you taking my call so quick. I've just wondered because of the fact that this asks at least two questions. Number one, they've already got agents at home checking out the returns. What's the problem with their internet connection? Is there a problem there? They need to be able to take care of that. Plus the fact that what kind of people are they hiring? And now that you mentioned waiters and waitresses, what happens if they get lower tips 1 year? Are they going to be in trouble for that business too?
Well, I think again, it's they're trying to go after folks that are just trying to get by. People that are working those jobs that are paying tips, those are tough jobs. And yeah, for the last 3 years, those jobs almost didn't exist. Now we're trying to rehire those folks, and no one wants to take those jobs because they realize they can be lost very quickly. Not good to rely on because we have government shutdowns now in the United States of America, and you lose all those jobs. So every industry is still having a trouble finding people to even take these jobs. But what it goes back to, Harry, is we have all these other federal law enforcement divisions to assist the IRS if they feel like they are going into a dangerous situation. Why do they need their own army? That's my question, is why do we want to give another agency that we've had a lot of problems with and that we've talked about for years as Republicans and conservatives totally reforming? When we have such a mess with the FBI, let's not weaponize and militarize another government agency.
I think you're right on the basis of policy, but it's important to keep in mind that the federal government increasingly is driven by ideology. And so now they want to arm up, if you will, each and every federal agency, which means that each and every federal secretary, cabinet official, IRS chief can send in armed individuals pursuant to their own whim, unlimited, if you will, by the United States Constitution. So I think we have more than an adequate number of federal armed officials without arming our IRS agents. But nonetheless, keep in mind, this is what a majority of Congress voted for. This is what the President of the United States signed on to. And this is consistent with the agenda of cultural and political elites, and the American people need to stand up against this.
All right, folks, again, we want to hear from you at 1-800-684-3110. There's a lot of interest in this, Logan. Do you have time to take one more call before we get to the second half hour?
Yeah, we could probably come up with something really quick. Let's go to Kevin. You're on the air, line 3.
Hello?
Quick.
Can you hear me?
Kevin, put you on hold. We'll get back to you in the next segment because we only have a couple minutes. Stay on hold, though. We will get to you just to make sure that we got you here.
We got one line open right now.
Oh, gone.
And it's gone.
And it's gone.
We're about to go to a break. And it's back open.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Well, you know what? We want to hear from you on this. Of course, we get your comments in on places like Rumble, Facebook, and YouTube.
Yeah.
If you're watching there, share it with your friends and family. So if you're watching, you can take that link and share it out right now because we got a second half hour coming up. And I think people need to know about this because they tried to act like they shut this down, just like they did with like the disinformation board, you know. They try to act like they shut it down. They took it down from their website. They had the new commissioner go up and say, we're just armed with calculators.
Yep.
But if you really listen to what he said, that's our civil division. And now they're trying to expand their criminal enforcement division with special agents. And this is what we have to, again, focus on at the ACLJ. We are in court right now with the IRS. I mean, I want people to understand that. We're in court right now because they are continuing, it appears, to target conservative and religious groups applying for tax-exempt status, which they cannot do. We beat them once on that issue in court when we represented all of the Tea Party cases. If you're part of the MAGA movement, you know, we were there when it was created. It was years ago. I think the Tea Party birthed MAGA in many ways. If you look at the leaders that were there, the people who were there early on, to bring in this kind of say, let's drain this, all those ideas. We're starting there, and every time you get close to another election, they want to shut these groups down. So they told us they got 43,000 responsive documents for us now. In the last 2 years, when we asked for, are you targeting conservatives? We use the words of conservatives, Christian, all those ideological terms. Yeah, they got them, but they don't want it. It's too much work for them to go through 43,000 documents. We're going to get them. Support the work of the ACLJ at aclj.org.
Here's what I want to say to our ACLJ members, or for those of you that enjoy watching this broadcast. Whether it is going after the deep state, whether it is litigation that we're engaged in, whether it is defending the persecuted church and getting individuals out of prison because of their faith in other countries, whether it's training lawyers to fight for religious liberty, not just here in the United States, but around the globe, whether it is producing a daily, 5 days a week, 1 hour live television and radio broadcast heard on thousands of radio stations, on TV platforms, on social media platforms. Your support of the ACLJ enables us to do all of this. We want to encourage you to support the work of the ACLJ. And when you do that, you're supporting our production teams, our videos, whether it's that kind of production and other things that we are working on. The ACLJ is front and center on this. We're in a matching challenge campaign. Any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. Go to ACLJ.org.
Keeping you informed and engaged. Now more than ever. This is Sekulow. And now your host, Jordan Sekulow.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We're also looking at, too, does the IRS have a history where they need this kind of protection on their own? Like they can't rely on the FBI?
Yeah, it's one of the job requirements on you're posting it on the website that you have to take deadly force, to be ready to take deadly force. And that did open up a couple questions.
With automatic weapons.
Yeah.
Okay. So we looked it up. Since the IRS was founded, 4 agents have been killed in their criminal division. None in any, this is how it's quoted. None of those 4 died in such a way that a weapon or the person would have been necessary. There was no shootout with an armed suspect. So was it I don't know if it was a vehicle incident or something else.
Heart attack happened, stress-induced, something,
But it was not involved in an actual violent crime. Okay, so it wasn't part of the raid. So they have no real history.
Yeah.
And that's their entire history.
And then you flip it the other way and go, if one of your major job responsibilities to use deadly force, how often are you expected to do this? And how often, by the way, is this happening? How often is an IRS agent actually using deadly force with an automatic weapon?
Yeah.
That would be very interesting to see. My mind, because look, I think for a lot of people, we didn't even think that this is what the IRS did or does. My mind would be very little. This is not happening that much that they are showing up and getting into this. I could be wrong. Yeah, so there was 1 heart attack, 2 car accidents, and 1 struck by a vehicle.
Yeah, so even there, so 0
So
people,
medical and accidents,
have been killed in a shootout, in the situation where you think like they're going in with guns ablazing, basically, which is what you would if they only justify. So really, no justification to need a division which already has about 2,000 armed special agents.
3 of those were special agents from 1989, 91, and 99, and then the heart attack was in 2012.
Okay. So none of those were related to an actual, well, the gun wouldn't have done anything.
It doesn't seem like it. I don't know all the details, but it seems like,
that's because
these were true accidents or medical emergencies.
They are not supposed to be, and I'm sure they weren't the front line to go into a building. They came in after you, after the FBI, after another law enforcement and after a law enforcement agency that is armed, who would then secure the premises. And then you go in and take the documents you need. Back then, it would have been just taking the documents. Now it'd be getting the computers, the files that you need, plus the paper files as well. But they want machine guns. They want automatic weapons. This is the same time with the same people pushing this, same Democrats authorizing this money, want to defund your local police when there is a massive crime increase, a massive homelessness crisis, a massive drug crisis. We had Senator Hagerty on earlier. We were talking about the fentanyl crisis. It's the number 1 cause of death for Americans between the ages of 18 and 45. You know what isn't? Not paying your taxes is exactly right. You know, the government has a role to get that right, but it's really, is this the priority? It's weird that they prioritize this, Logan. It's not weird. We know why. They love weaponizing the federal government because they control the swamp. They want to defund your local police because they're actually responsive to the community they serve.
Right. They want to take those guys out, replace them with agents that can't use deadly force, of which obviously, I mean, if you had to look into it, does your local police officer, is he running into much more harm than your IRS agent? I would assume that's true in almost even the smallest of little towns.
Every time they pull someone over for speeding, it's dangerous.
Right. I'd say that's even in the smallest of small towns, police force.
Oh, yeah, especially because of the drug crisis that we've seen through meth, places like that, which a lot of times is in small towns and is in rural areas. They're dealing with a lot more real armed, dangerous violence. If you're in a major city, you've probably lost more police officers in the last 2 years in violence than the IRS has ever lost in any kind of situation.
Yeah, non-violent situation. I mean, you'd say, yes, a car accident. I don't know if they were, trying to, whatever happened there, but these were accidents likely.
Yeah.
Or medical emergencies.
It's weird that they even marked those down.
Maybe, I mean, the automobile ones, I guess, could be in pursuit or something.
If it was while you were on the job, it would be considered, you were working while it happened. So, again, it's not to downplay those people's loss of life. It's to say, what is your need here? Why is the FBI not enough for you? Why do you need machine guns? And why do you need more of them? Why do you need 1,200 more? Why are you always trying to add more guns at the federal level and less guns to protect us on our streets, in our communities? 1-800-684-3110. Join us.
In my
my time in service, both as the CIA director and the Secretary of State, I watched the good work that the ACLJ was doing here in the States and all across the world.
The ACLJ's work at the UN, overseas with the European Court of Justice, is incredibly important.
We have on our team lawyers, non-lawyers as well, that are policy experts. They're all engaged in foreign policy issues.
We have been focused on protecting the nation state of Israel, particularly before the United Nations.
We don't shy away from the battles that are going on at the UN and just complain about them. We actually try to go in and do something positive and actually affect change.
The risk of a incomplete or unsolid relationship within the United States of America and Israel is real.
Israel is very important to the ACLJ, and we will always fight for Israel's rights.
We had a series of cases at the European Court of Human Rights, primarily dealing with religious liberty.
And as Secretary of State, I saw this too. Nations that had more religious freedom were on firmer footing. They had better democracies.
America has always been the world leader in religious liberties, in freedom of conscience, and freedom of speech.
We've taken the First Amendment, and that has been our cornerstone. It's to defend the rights of people of faith and others that are having their rights abused.
We not only hold our government accountable, but we hold other governments accountable.
You have to keep the battle going when it's not cool anymore, when it's not the #1 story on TV. You have to actually be committed to fighting it out, or else you'll never win.
The ACLJ's front and center on this. We're in a matching challenge campaign. Any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. Your support of the ACLJ enables us to do all of this. Go to aclj.org today. That's aclj.org.
All right, welcome back to Sekulow. We are taking your phone calls. Let me encourage you to support the work of the ACLJ. We have been in battling with the IRS for years. I mean, we the Tea Party cases, we're in court right now with the IRS. It takes bold action because for so many years, people would complain about the IRS, but they were scared to fight back against the IRS in a proactive way. You might fight back in a defensive way if the IRS was coming after you, but you didn't want to proactively, poke the bear, if you will. We've decided at the ACLJ, we're not going to stop the keeping track of the IRS because what they did to these Americans who were organizing grassroots groups with the Tea Party movement and Christian organizations who got looped into that as well was not only unacceptable and unconstitutional, is un-American. And we got people removed from the IRS. We got their directors of their tax-exempt organizations. They tried to blame it on lower-level staff and field offices. That was all bogus. We got the consent order. There was also financial damages for those groups as well in a second case. Then they did it again in 2021 to a Christian group. And what we said was, if this group was the one willing to stand up and say something, Christians engaged, likely because when we were dealing with the Tea Party cases, the IRS said they sent out hundreds of those same unconstitutional requests for info like content of your prayer, speeches, back-end access to your website, your email list, your database, all of that again, was something they had never asked for before and is totally...
It can only be used for bad.
For political targeting. Viewpoint discrimination is what we call it. That you want to target this group because you think they're conservative. You think, and for Christians engaged, it was because they are Christian, they are conservative Christians. They must be just a front for a Republican political group. So that you can't just be a Christian engaged. You have to be a Christian who is
silenced,
right in line with the Republican parties. By the way, what do we know is that less and less people are even aligned with these political parties even more.
I know.
And you kind of start your own group because you support your own ideologies and methods you want to teach people about, you want to educate people about, because you don't support the major party apparatuses. We're not like Democrats in the sense of the conservative movement is bigger than the Republican Party.
Well, even if you did, that's the weird part about this. Let's say you do support more conservative values because you're an evangelical Christian.
Of course
and
you
that directs your values. Well, of course it does. But you being harassed for it or intimidated about it, it's not the country we're supposed to be living in. You want to take some calls?
Yeah, let's go back to the phones.
Got a lot of people on hold for a long time, so we're going to keep going through, and then phone lines will open. If you hear someone on, that means the phone line's about to open back up. Let's go to Kevin, who's calling us once again in New England. Nebraska? Nebraska. Line 3.
Nebraska.
Hello.
You're on the air.
Thanks for taking my call. I support you guys every week and every month. And my question is are they just going to zero in on conservatives with this? And why are they even questioning what we pay in? Because generally people have their taxes prepared by tax firms, and what the federal government takes out of my check, they determine that. I don't have any determination over that. So why do they think they need to be armed?
Because they are trying to go after the folks who aren't utilizing those services because they can't afford it. So it's people who it's the gig economy, it's the tips, people who again are making more transactions maybe through like these new services like Venmo and Zelle and things like that. We know they want to go after more of those. That they want to be able to track more of those and have access to more of those financial transactions. They want to lower it to like, what was it, $600? They want to track everything.
Everything over $600.
Which was, that's a lot of transactions. A lot of people just refunding each other for like a trip. It's like, you have a buddy book the round of golf.
It's the way a lot of us just pay for things now.
Yeah, instead of, so you can get one person can put their credit card down at dinner and then all of you just quickly, and it's instant. So it's not like some complicated thing to pay them back where you never get paid back. You feel like you kind of handle it. Like if you need to tip somebody now too, oftentimes that I'll just take a picture of their what do you call it?
The Venmo little QR code.
The QR code, right?
Yeah.
And honestly, I've had like Uber drivers who don't really speak English.
Yeah. But
we can understand QR codes and things like that, and just being able to transact that way. It's very American, actually. That we use this, but that's who, Kevin, they want to go after is people who, unlike some of us who can. It's great that we might be able to afford someone to help with our accounting. A lot of people can't, or they're using maybe like a internet, like some kind of computer program.
Yeah,
and
easy file type stuff.
That computer program is not as it's not like you can have them say, blame it on them. Say like they're not the front facing like an accountant might be for you. It's already an agency that's impossible to deal with. If they wanted to take this money and say we're gonna revitalize this, so when you call the IRS, we'll pick up the phone. When you apply for tax exempt status, it won't take 3 years to get.
Yeah, it would be nice.
Okay. Then I wouldn't say we should abolish you. But when you say no, we want to take that money and buy automatic weapons with it. While at the same time, they're trying to take our guns away and defund our local police. So two things they're trying to do always, the left. Take your guns away, but also take your police forces' budgets away. So those are two dangerous things. And give them more, like military power. I mean, that's what it feels like we're militarizing. When I say weaponization, I'm not just talking about like law enforcement. It's like a militarization of law enforcement. And that they've criticized so much at the local level. They say SWAT teams are too militarized. They don't need those special vehicles that are bulletproof and things like that, and crowd control vehicles. But that's what they want. They want more of it. And who is the enemy? Look at Joe Biden's campaign launch.
Yeah, everyone who
it's
pretty much those search terms that we were looking for.
That was the second thing he showed up. Did you support Donald? Are you MAGA? Yeah. He used that too, MAGA extremist, because you can't be MAGA and not an extremist. Yeah. You can't want to make America great again and not be a white supremacist who's violent against the United States. So you are the enemy.
And then, of course, the next part of it was, I'm a uniter, bringing together red and blue people.
Well, we talked about Tulsi yesterday, and it's all about freedom. But the only freedom, you don't have freedom of speech under their view.
They've corrupted the word freedom. They've taken it, they've tried to take it back.
Freedom means woke.
Yeah.
And by the way, just try to stay up to speed with that. You need people do. They hire those people at their office just to keep them woke.
Yeah, the whole
because it's a changing term. You got to keep changing the terms.
Yeah, but I think we're finally seeing some corrections.
I think Bud Light and Anheuser-Busch could have.
Yeah, I saw the ads Bud Light was running on the NFL draft last night. It was they're like all tailgating in the pouring rain. It's like, okay, there's some major course correction happening here. Very interesting.
Well, the immediate ad they put back out was a replay ad of the
Clydesdales.
Yeah.
Which, great ads. We're going to take some more calls. Let's do one more call before the break, and then we'll come back and we will get through as many of these as we can. Who's been on hold the longest? Ron in Nevada. You're on the Airline 6.
How are you?
We are good. Go ahead.
In my experience, 1,200 extra IRS agents, they have their own investigation and peace officer precinct, if I'm correct. I don't understand why they need to add another 1,200 more. You understand what I'm saying?
What the Congress are saying is, why the need to weaponize more agents? Like, what is your need? It's not just because we want to. Congress decides what your budget is and what you get paid to utilize your budget. So why do you want to use this budget for this when you have a failing customer service, which is what it should be, department? You don't answer phones. You're still using fax machines and typewriters. No one has gone back to the IRS offices. They're still working from home. It's in effect, it's a failed agency when it just comes to dealing with the American people, and they admit it. I mean, how many times have you gotten things from the IRS saying we're going to be 6 months delayed, a year delayed?
All the time.
Remember, I think under COVID, was it like
I got my
2 years
refund check last year, and then they sent me a letter the next day saying, do not do this. We've miscalculated your refund. You're actually going to get more.
But if you cash that,
and then I never got that check, by the way. So I'm
never
still
got
in kind of a fight with that.
But that's the problem. Don't give them more guns. Don't give them more guns. Make them either correct or abolish. Don't let them just keep weaponizing. And that is what they're trying to do. Now, we at the ACLJ have not let up on them. You kind of have to keep the I guess, you have to, the best way to say it is you have to continue to poke the bear. You have to be willing to poke the IRS bear. Most groups and most people have run away from the IRS. We went proactively against the IRS, and we stood with, out of all of those Tea Party groups, this is what we're always concerned about. Out of all those Tea Party groups, they said they sent out hundreds of letters. There were only about 25 who were willing to file a lawsuit against the IRS. Because most people, understandably, by the way, were worried about poking that bear. So when they went after a group 2 years ago that was a Christian group, we said, there's no way they just went after them. So who else did they deny? And we just got back last week in the status report, the reason why it's taken so long to get their FOIA response is they found 43,000 responsive records. And can we please limit what we need, because that will take them too long to do. This is an agency with a billions of dollar budget, and they can't go through documents that show that they might be, inappropriately targeting Americans. We're doing the work. Support ACLJ. Donate today. ACLJ.org.
The IRS has finally released a list of political groups it has scrutinized.
I received this letter with a bunch of questions
that we all knew immediately was not right.
And at that point, I knew I was a target.
Tea Party groups say they're being targeted by the Internal Revenue Service, and they're enlisting the aid of the American Center for Law and Justice.
They were trying to shut groups down that they disagreed with.
I'll never forget what Jay said when he said, we've got your back and we're going to be taking care of this. And I felt like the weight of the world was off of my shoulders.
Ms. Lerner, why would you say Tea Party cases were very dangerous?
The IRS started targeting Tea Party groups more than 3 years ago.
Never before has the federal government tried to muzzle everyday Americans solely because of their political view.
You don't expect this kind of intimidation.
There were some boneheaded decisions out of a
but no
office.
mass corruption.
Not even a smidgen of corruption.
Lois Lerner admitted that agency employees singled out particular groups for extra scrutiny.
They used names like Tea Party or Patriots, and they selected cases simply because the application had those names in the title.
It was something that no one could believe our government was even capable of doing.
They have way too much power and no accountability.
Lois Lerner knew what was coming.
They got caught. The federal government got caught.
It is worth any battle to preserve our liberty.
We were fighting the United States of America at this point.
They knew they were breaking the law. They knew they were violating our rights.
We accidentally stumbled into the corruption that is the largest scandal in American history.
welcome back to Sekulow. We're going to take your calls. And by the way, the IRS in the case that we're in, they wanted to dismiss it. So we had a reason why to file the FOIA because they, again, were targeting a Christian group. They resolved it because of public outcry. And it's great that we can get that resolved so quickly now with public outcry, that you don't have to go through years of court battles. That's because of our initial case where we did go through years of court battles with the IRS on behalf of the Tea Party groups. But what we did say is, okay, it's wonderful that because this group was willing to speak out and you got all this bad press attention, you approved them. But how many groups did you send this letter out that were people that applied for exempt status that just didn't want to follow up because they don't want to fight with the IRS? Because remember, even when you're filing as a group, a lot of individuals, you have to have a board. You have to have, your officers. You got to put your name down, your address down. So you're putting yourself.
Yeah, you're going out there.
For a second time, because you're asking the IRS for a special status, and you're, as we've always said, you're voluntarily submitting to their oversight. Actually, under the tax code, as a lot of people don't know, you can have a tax-exempt organization without filing for the status.
How does that work?
The status is it so because many companies would require it for you to get insurance, and a lot of bigger donors would want you to move forward. But it's kind of like, churches under the tax are completely just exempt. No filings.
Yeah, you don't
now,
do anything.
some of them have other side things like schools and then other properties. They might have other ministries that are not part of the actual church. And so a lot of them still end up filing some kind of tax returns. Yeah. But what the problem is, usually with the IRS, is that you'll see them do it to Matt Taibbi and he is willing to say something. But how many people they show up at their door and they're like, I don't want to talk about it. Yeah. Most. Right? And totally understandable.
Yeah. How many times you get in a bill and you're like, I'm just going to pay it?
Right. Because you're getting back and forth with them. By the way, they don't respond. When they do, it's very hostile. And you always seem like when you're dealing with them, they're mad.
Yeah, you're annoying to them.
You're the problem. Except you're supposed to be giving me money back, or I'm supposed to be giving you money. Right. We're all on the same. We're all Americans trying to. Most people, I'd say 99.9% of Americans, are just trying to comply with a tax code that is this big and impossible, really, to fully comply with.
All right, let's go ahead and take some calls. Let's get Tim on the air in California on line 1. Tim, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I believe what the Biden administration wants to do with these Central America processing centers, just go back to the system that worked. The Trump administration had the border under control, and as usual, the Biden administration wants to make the situation worse.
Yeah, well, I think, listen, we talked about border. Should we play the bite from Mayorkas? Because this I loved. He doesn't even hide the ball anymore about how open they want the border and what they're going to do when Title 42 is gone, which is like next week, right? May 12th. So there's like at least 40,000 people at the border right now, and they know that there's families. So he got asked, okay, there's families. Are you going to basically house them? Are you ready to put them into some kind of confinement, whether basically arrest them, or you go because you can't expel them anymore immediately without the Title 42 power. So what are you going to do with all these people and these families? Take a listen.
We have no plan to detain families. As I mentioned, we will be employing alternatives to detention, including some innovations in that regard. And we will, on a case-by-case basis, use enhanced alternatives to detention as warranted.
Enhanced alternatives to detention. So you're just going to give them a house? These are illegal immigrants taking the spot of somebody who's waiting in line from those same countries trying to come here legally. I love that the first question is we have no plan. We have no plan. We're not detaining anybody. And in fact, we're going to use some new enhanced. That sounds scary.
It does sound scary.
But it's an alternative.
Alternatives to detention as warranted sounds freaky. But what they're saying is,
but if you define what enhanced alternative
we're going to give you an
Airbnb,
Airbnb.
No detention.
Yeah,
that means hotels, apartment buildings, taking
rental
over
homes.
Your city.
Yeah.
And then the hospitals in that town had to shut down because they can't afford to treat everybody, or there's not enough police in the streets, and so people leave those cities. And we're seeing that all over border cities.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's keep going, try to get some more of these calls. Denise calling in Pennsylvania on line 4. You're on the air.
Yeah, hi. Thank you for the work that you do. I have a comment about the IRS, the agents getting guns, and like why they feel that's necessary, yet they want to defund the police and try and take guns away from Americans. Every time I watch the news, I'm just looking, I feel like at a bunch of hypocrites who say one thing and do another. And what I was wondering is, how do you get just the truth out on?
Well, it's become more difficult, right, to get the truth out, because when you say things, I read a headline yesterday on Instagram. Literally, I did an Instagram video before the show about what we're going to talk about. It was in the news with the Taliban killing the leader of the ISIS-K in Afghanistan. And I got a warning from Instagram about supporting violent groups. Obviously, it was AI because no human was listening to say. That was just reporting of news. But like you said, we know there's places like Rumble.
Yeah.
And of course, our broadcast stations too.
Yeah.
Where we're able to speak out without being censored. Then you've got to elect good people who are not just going to give lip service to this, but to really reform the IRS will take a bold Republican president, because look what they did to Donald Trump the first time he tried to get rid of any of these people. Okay. They're still going after him in multiple ways. Then you've got to have a conservative House and Senate, and not just for 2 years. Okay. You'd have to have it for probably 8. That historically is very difficult politically to keep both the White House, the House, and the Senate. But if you're going to get real reforms done at the level we're talking about, that is what we will need to do, which means we need to convince our fellow Americans to join our cause.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why you guys support the work of the ACLJ by going to aclj.org. I don't know if we have time for the remainder of the calls. We've got a minute and a half. We have 2 minutes. All right, let's go to Robin in New York. Last call of the day. Keep it quick, Robin. Sorry, we ran out of time. Mary, I'm so sorry we ran out of time. Go ahead, Robin.
My question is should we be more concerned with IRS agents carrying weapons or weaponizing calculators?
Great point.
Great way to wrap up.
And that's what they are doing. They're weaponized. Their calculators are their weapon, and that's what Danny said, the commissioner of the IRS. Their weapon is their calculator. But that's not how they should be looking at it. In most cases, these are just Americans trying to comply. Now, they might sometimes get tax bills that are tough for them to pay right away. They need to negotiate the payment plan. They do that. They're supposed to do that. Because most people are just trying to follow the rules. There's only so many bad actors in the country that want to even potentially get into it with the IRS or are willing to take that risk. And they have a division for that. But they have weaponized their calculators. They weaponize their documents. They weaponize the tax-exempt division against Americans and against your rights. But we're fighting back the ACLJ. We want you to go to aclj.org. That's aclj.org. By the way, we've also launched to a new website, new campaign at aclj.org/coverup. So we want you to go to that link, and that's a great one to share with your friends and family who might not know a lot about our work.
Yeah,
because it gets into just one of our cases that we're working on, but it gets deeply into it in a really interactive and cool way. So share that link with your friends and family, aclj.org/coverup. I'd really ask you to put that on social media and donate if you can at aclj.org. Talk to you next week.